Hello YouTube, today we're going to be looking at something just a little bit different. A few months ago Dovetail Games announced a route which was going to be released on Steam called The Story of Forest Rail. And however, after a few months we didn't have any more updates and several people were wondering what had happened to the route. So you can imagine my surprise when yesterday morning the company Just Trains announced that they'd released this route. So I bought it straight away because it interested me. The route is a semi-fictional route based in Japan. It's based on a real railway route, but some of the place names have been changed and a new fictional town has been added. This first video will be just a short run along a part of the route from a place called Sawakokawa all the way through to Naraka. Now, I'm probably going to be pronouncing some of these place names embarrassingly wrong, so I'm going to flash up subtitles each time I mention a place name, so that you can see how it's spelt, and maybe anyone with a bit of knowledge of Japan or Japanese culture can correct me on my pronunciations. The journey today is going to be 23.5 kilometers, which is around 14 miles, and we will be calling at Inyodo, Wasara and Naraka, where we will end this journey, and then later on I will make a second video for part 2 of this route. So the train for the journey is a KIHA 750 train, which is a single coach train as you've just seen from the outside. So just having a quick look around the cab, as you can see there's not many controls and it looks rather old. If we then use the arrow keys we can move position in the cab, and then we can also move into the passenger cabin and have a look around. And I'll just keep pressing the right arrow and we move further back in the cabin, which is empty at the minute. There does appear to be an anime cartoon character at the back of the train. I'm not familiar with anime, so I don't know who this is, but maybe somebody could tell me in the comments. Departing Sawakokawa, the starting speed limit is 30 kilometers per hour, which is just under 20 miles per hour, and we've got just under 7 kilometers to go to the next stop, which is Inyodo. Past the crossing we've just gone over, the speed limit has now gone up to 50 kilometers per hour. However, there are many steep gradients on this route, and we will shortly be going down quite a steep gradient. Therefore, I'm just going to allow the train to coast at the speed it's at now, as we'll soon be picking up speed towards the 50 kilometer per hour speed limits. As you can see, we are now picking up speed. The gradient does temporarily level off, and then it gets even steeper, and we go down on a grade as steep as 4.5%, which we will reach just before the tunnel just coming up, and we will certainly be needing to use the brakes to control our speed. I have now applied the brakes just to slow down a bit, so I've slowed down to 40 kilometers per hour. I've released the brakes and you can see the speed is quickly going back up. So I'm once again reapplying the brakes, trying to find a good position to maintain speed. After we entered the tunnel, the gradient shallowed to 3.4% downward grade, And as we get towards the end of the tunnel, the grade shallows even further to 1.4%. Now leaving the tunnel, the speed limit has gone up to 65 kilometers per hour. Once again, we're still going downhill, so I'm just released the brakes and I'm just going to allow the train to coast up to the 65 speed limit. One thing that I did notice about this route is the amount of trackside foliage which you see seems to be much more diverse than in any other route I've seen in Train Simulator, and I think it just makes the route look a lot nicer and a lot more beautiful. As you can see, we've got a lot of beautiful mountain scenery with tree-covered mountains. Just past the 40-mile post on the left. As we pass that, we've got around 2 3/4 kilometers to go to our stop at Inyodo. At this point, we're about to be going on a steep downhill grade temporarily again, as steep as 4.2%. We are temporarily going uphill, so I'm now applying power just to ensure we don't lose too much speed. We will shortly be arriving at our stop. You can see here the gradient starting to level out as we cross this bridge. and then we'll be going on another steep downhill section of 4.2% towards our stop. So I'm now going to idle the power and allow the train to coast. There is a 30 km/h speed limit at our stop, so when I see the warning for that on the left, I will then be braking quite hard to ensure that we slow down in time. You can just see the station coming up in the distance, and this is the warning for the 30 km/h speed limit. Here's our stop at Inyodo. Departing Inyodo, the starting speed limit is 30 km/h, but as you can see it's quickly going up now to 65 km/h. And we've got around 4 kilometers to go to the next stop, which is Wasara. As we approach 65 km/h, I've just pulled the power back to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. We will shortly be going uphill. We're just starting the climb now. The uphill gradient will get as steep as 4.9% as we get further along this section of track. And at that point I will then go into full power. Now starting the much steeper part of the climb, so I am now in full power to try and ensure we don't lose too much speed. On a 4.9% grade, even in full power we will lose speed until we're doing about 25 to 30 km/h. Now clearly see the top of the hill just coming up here at the gradient change, so I'm now going to gradually reduce power. We will shortly be going downhill on a grade as steep as 4.9%, so I'm now going to use the brakes to control speed once again. Gradient is now levelling off, as you can see, and the white post just coming up on the right indicates that we're around a kilometre from our stop, allowing the train to coast as we get towards our stop. Now see some houses coming up on the left, which indicates that we are getting near to Wasara. You can also now see the platform coming up just ahead, so I have now applied light braking to slow us down. So here we are at Wasara. Departing Wasara, the starting speed limit is still 65 km per hour, and we've got around 12.5 kilometers to go to our final stop for this video, which is Naraka. At 65 km per hour, I've idled power to ensure that we don't go above that. So we're just losing a little bit of speed, so I've now applied a little bit of power. As we get back up to 65, I will idle the power once again. And just keep repeating this just to try and maintain us at around 65 km per hour, which is around 40 miles per hour for those watching in the UK or USA. There will shortly be a 60 km per hour speed limit coming up, at the same time as a downward gradient. The gradient will be down as steep as 3.6%. Just got the warning for the 60 km per hour speed limit on the left there. So I'm going to be having to use brakes now to control the speed. We've now entered the 60 km per hour speed zone. And we're going to be going downhill through this tunnel. Now see just here that the gradient is actually levelling out, so I'm now going to release the brakes. We're going to have to go between idle power and a low power setting once again to try and maintain our speed. Something else to point out, which you can't see quite so much in this video, is that during the daytime, especially in the summer, the colours on this route are very vivid and give it an almost fairy tale-like feel, but it does look incredibly beautiful. So in a future video I will be covering the full main line in the opposite direction in the summer, so you can see just how vibrant and beautiful those colours are. I've now idled the power, as we will shortly be going downhill once again. We'll be going down as steep as 3.2%, so we will need to use the brakes to control the speed. Actually now see that the gradient is changing and we're starting to go downhill. Now have a warning for a speed limit reduction to 50 kilometers per hour, so I'm just going to brake for that now to ensure that we're at below 50 in time, as we're still going to be going downhill. Shortly after this 50 limit, which we're now entering, we will be going into a tunnel. And you can see just there where our track is going to end up to the left. So this is a spiralling descent through this tunnel. I've slowed down just slightly too much there, so I've released the brakes, but we should quickly regain speed through coasting. We're going down 1.7% in the tunnel, and the gradient does in fact level near the end of this tunnel. As you can see, I've now released the brakes and we're still losing a little bit of speed, so the gradient has levelled. And just here we're now passing under the section of track which we went over just before we entered the tunnel. The speed limit has now gone back up to 60 kilometers per hour, and we are going downhill slightly again, so I've idled the power and I will allow the train to coast back up to the 60 speed limits. And as we get to 60, once again use the brakes just to ensure that I can control the speed. gradient has now temporarily levelled, so I've released the brakes, but I'm leaving the power in idle as we will shortly be going downhill again and regaining our speed. In fact, we're starting to regain speed already, as you can see on the speedometer. And now we're starting to go downhill again on a steeper gradient. So I'm now applying the brakes once again. The gradient is levelling out again, so I'm now releasing the brakes to see what happens to our speed. As you can see, we're not gaining speed now. We're just past the 22 kilometre post, which means we're getting close to our stop at Naraka. We're shortly going to be going down on a 3% grade. And we've got just over a kilometre to go, I believe now, to our stop. You can now see the green light of a signal just ahead. At this point the gradient levels out, and that's a sign that we're approaching Naraka. There'll shortly be a double track section, though it appears that the track on the right hand side has been abandoned. And we will brake for our stop just as we're entering the double track section. So now as we cross this point I will apply the brakes to slow down. Slowed down just slightly too early there, so I've released the brakes again. And as we round this curve to the left, you will see the platform coming up very shortly. Apologies for the sudden lag here, I'm not quite sure why it's happening. It only seems to happen when I'm recording, unfortunately. And now I see it's freed itself up again. So here is the platform here at Naraka. I'm going to aim to stop in the middle of the platform as the gap in the fence there appears to be the entrance. So if I stop around here, it should be about right. Thanks for watching. This was part one of a two-part scenario, so I will head into part two of this scenario soon, and then I will record that to complete the journey. I hope you've enjoyed the video.